Machines have become more streamlined, but still do the same jobs in the same way. There were certainly remarkable changes in the style of dress, but up until now, the style of work has remained very much the same. These girls are being trained in secretarial studies at a technical college. The course is available to young people with a Year 10 certificate. It lasts for 1 year, full-time. The course is designed to prepare these young girls for a future in office work. Having studied all these things like typing and shorthand and business communications and things like that, what sort of job do you think that's going to equip you to do?
Junior stenographer.
Junior stenographer.
And junior clerk.
Junior clerk. What else?
Office workers.
Office assistant.
Right, office assistant. Is that the sort of area of work that you'd be looking in the paper and so on?
No. You've got to have experience for a secretary.
So a secretary isn't what you're trained to do right now?
No, you've got to have experience.
That's our aim. You just work your way up
to secretary.
Yeah, to a secretary.
Usually bosses aren't willing to have secretaries who, like, they've got to be older so that they can take the responsibility.
So there's more than just typing and shorthand.
Yeah, because you've got to be able to work around the office without somebody telling you every little step that you've got to do.
I would have liked to have got a job using shorthand, typing and bookkeeping, and it just can't be done usually. It's either shorthand and typing or bookkeeping and typing, and a lot of the places that have bookkeeping are real estate agencies, and then you've got to work Saturday morning usually for that, and the money's not worth it.
Right. Well, do you expect to get the sort of position you're trying for? I mean, are your hopes still high?
No. Forget about it. Just
what do you think you're going to have
that comes up.
Sorry?
Get the first job that comes up and keep it.
And then once you've got the experience, after you've worked there for about 12 months, you've got experience and you can leave for a better job.
But when you're saying you'll take the first job that comes up, are you meaning anything?
No, in the secretarial line.
Sorry?
In the secretarial line of work.
What about retail? We'd work in a shop.
No, never.
But the world of office work, where these young people are going to find jobs, will be very different from the ways of the traditional office. Mr. Colin Bain is Managing Director of one of Australia's largest employment agencies. Mr. Bain, what are the changes taking place in the office today?
Well, the key to all of them lies in the application of very new and sophisticated electronic technology to the office, replacing increasingly manual work and human energy for all those tasks that are of a repetitive nature. These changes have come about specifically through the introduction to the office of the computer, the mini computer, which is a small but very powerful and fairly cheap computer, and for the smaller offices, the microcomputer, which is also a pretty sophisticated piece of work, although it's not so impressive to look at. It's small, it's easy to place in the office, it does a massive job.
Well, what do all these changes in technology mean to staffing?
Well, they've had a profound effect. I don't want to be alarmist about it. The effect isn't quite what some people have depicted it as being. But the effect of it is this, that the majority of people in the past who sought positions in offices ended up working, whether from choice or not, as filing clerks, mail clerks, stock clerks, copy typists, contract typists, invoice typists, and elementary accounts clerks, pay clerks, keeping stock records, pay records, and elementary accounts records. There was a legion of people involved in such work. Now, virtually the whole of those jobs are either totally redundant already or fairly rapidly becoming redundant, because the whole of those functions is being put on the computer.
Microcomputers like this one today can handle the complete range of accounting functions that a small to medium-sized business would need, from invoicing their customers to setting out statements at the end of the month, looking after stock control, payroll, right through to producing a balance sheet at the end of the year.
That's obviously a task that must have been done by lots of different people in the past.
Yes, in the past, a firm that size would have had girls typing out invoices, typing out statements, perhaps an outside firm to get their payroll out, an outside accountant to do their balance sheet, but all this can be done inside the firm now by the computer and a computer operator.
And how does it actually work?
Well, the computer works from programs that are stored on a floppy disk. They're magnetic coated plastic discs that when inserted into the machine, the computer will read the information stored there and use it.
Where would that information normally have been in an office before computerisation?
Normally it would have been stored on racks of cards in a warehouse for stock that would have been on stock cards. If they had been mechanised with an accounting machine, it would have been on rows of ledger cards. But the two floppy disks in the machine replace all those. As you can see, the information can be displayed on a TV-type screen. Information can also be typed in and to be written onto those discs through a keyboard, which is a standard typewriter keyboard, or information can be also displayed through a printer.
Now, why would you want the information in the printed form?
Well, to send out invoices to customers, you have a printed record. To send out statements to your customers, to print out a payroll slip, this sort of thing. As I explained before, the programs and the information are stored permanently on the floppy disk record. The computer uses that information through the heart of the computer in this chip here. It also uses or stores the information as it's calculating and displaying the information on the screen by storing it in its central memory, which are these chips here. Several years ago, the internal or the electronic circuitry in those chips would have filled an average size classroom. That's the size of the chip today. This is the state of the advanced state that microtechnology has reached now.
If low-cost microtechnology is the centre of today's office revolution, the typewriting machine began it all back at the turn of the century. From the earliest manual typewriter to the latest electric golf ball, the basic principle has remained the same. The speed of the typist determines the speed of the work. The invention of the typewriter brought women into the office for the first time. A well-brought-up young lady could now seek employment as a typist until she married, rather than remain at home. The now familiar boss-secretary roles took shape. The boss, often a man, the secretary, usually a woman. Women and typewriting machines were seen to belong together. Traditionally, the role of the secretary includes typing her boss's letters, handling his telephone calls, and all his correspondence. The storage of all this information required an up-to-date filing system. An efficient filing system has always been the key to a smoothly running office. But times have changed. Today, the computer is able to store the whole filing system of a modern office. No paper is required. The floppy disk is not the only method of storage available. The changeover started with paper tape, which works rather like music rolls for a pianola. The magnetic card is useful for single document work. It can be corrected or reused. The magnetic cassette works out cheaper per page than the mag card, but searching through the cassette for a particular section can be time-consuming. The magnetic cartridge has a greater capacity than the cassette, but it's expensive. The floppy disk, on the other hand, is very popular in offices and relatively cheap. The stored information can be instantly recalled. The entire filing system of a large office can be stored onto the hard disk. It's capable of storing over 1 million characters, but it's bulky and costly. The computer which is changing the role of the secretary almost overnight is the word processor. It's probably as revolutionary as the invention of the typewriter. It's a computer programmed to store words rather than figures. It uses no paper, so the text can be instantly edited. Correcting punctuation, changing the layout. Here, the blocked out paragraph is to be moved with no need to bother about layout or line lengths. That's done automatically. And if the final document is required on paper, a printer takes care of that at 180 words a minute.
There's a 12-pitch wheel in the printer.
Okay, Tina.
2 or 3 word processors can do the work of 10 typewriters.
They're not suitable for all offices because they're too expensive. In particular, big impact in government offices, in banks, in insurance companies, and in legal firms, where, of course, there's a lot of contract typing to be done. And with the contract typing that used to, say, in a legal office require 25 typists, today, one girl who isn't typing most of the time can type all the contracts required from the word processor at 180 words a minute.
A large Sydney insurance firm has introduced word processing in order to increase productivity and to cut costs. All the typing work required by every officer in the firm is handled by operators working in a central word processing area. This is how it works.
This is Peter Jenkins here, Legal Department. I have a letter to dictate. The letter's to William Smith and Company Solicitors.
16 Bridge Street, Sydney, 2000's the postcode. Dear Sir,
The letter is recorded onto a magnetic card.
the premises at 38 Botany Road.
A work coordinator collects the recording and details all relevant information.
I have received the draft documents
The job is then allocated to a suitable word processing operator.
over the above premises, for which I thank you. Full stop.
Sure. Do you think we could do this for 12 o'clock? Yeah. With Virgin? Alright, come back. Right. Okay. This is me.
The operator places the magnetic card into her own recorder in order to transcribe the letter onto her video display unit. That's the TV-type screen in front of her. It's automatically set out. Corrections and edits are instantaneous. The completed letter has been stored onto another magnetic card. For paper copy, the printer transfers the letter from the magnetic card to paper within 10 seconds. The completed letter is transported via the building's rather unusual transport system back to the officer who originated the work.
We'll keep you advised as this matter progresses. Yours faithfully, and that can be signed. Prince Solicitor.
Anyone work in an ordinary office before you came to work here?
Yes.
What's the sort of essential difference?
You work for one person. You don't just work for, you know, a whole group of people.
In a conventional office, you work for
I work
one
for
person.
just one person.
And how does that feel, having lost that?
You got satisfaction out of doing it for him because he thanked you for what he did, and you always, you know, you knew where you stood all the time. You just, you know, you do work for other people, but you got appreciated a lot more when you just work for one boss rather than in a centre. You're sort of just classed as a centre, rather than
A number.
an individual.
Half the people you type for, you don't know.
Very little personal contact with the people, and as Sue said, with results, you rarely get to know the people that you work for.
I prefer the machinery I'm on now. What the ideal job would be is to be on the machinery and just go back and work for
Yes, the machinery, the modern machinery with the one-to-one situation.
but it would never work.
After you've done that, can you photocopy all the documents in here and index them? And then it goes at the front of the brief. And can you do me a memo to Alison and ask her?
One of Sydney's largest law firms is in the process of changing over to word processing. The firm still employs legal secretaries, but their role is changing.
And one can go on the back of the file.
The secretarial role has changed quite considerably. Today, with the advent of dictation equipment, word processing machines, quite sophisticated telecommunications. In this office, on occasions, we still use shorthand, but not very often.
Okay. Then, can you make sure that I've got an extra copy of the brief on the file?
5 years, it may even be earlier. I don't believe that we'll see a 1-1 ratio anymore. I don't believe that we can afford to keep it on that basis anymore. Many secretaries today are working for 2, if not 3 people. This varies, and I think you've got to look at individual needs. There are still many professional people who require a full-time secretary. And at this point of time, I think that it's fair to go along with that. I think because you introduce word processing, you can't expect everybody to change overnight.
Do you work only to Mary, or do you work to several solicitors?
No, I work only to Mary at the moment, but if I'm not really busy, I will take on other work.
Is that unusual in the firm? Has the sort of one-to-one solicitor-secretary relationship changed with word processing?
Yes, it has. As a rule, there are only one secretary to 2 solicitors.
Right.
Suzanne does do some work for a paraleg, a solicitor, but who does semi-legal type work. And she helps out with what we call overflow. When people are frantically busy, she'll do the overflow for them. So, in effect, I suppose you do work for more than one person, although that other person isn't defined.
Have you ever been tempted to work in the word processing centre?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have.
And
I have inquired.
Right. Why would you be interested?
Only to see how it works, how it's run. Only
Would be permanently.
Oh, no. No way.
What is it about secretarial functions that you like?
I love the contact we have with clients, and I love
With the word processing unit, you don't have the contact with the files, you can't follow through a matter. I like to keep in with the matter from the beginning to the end, and I love filing and I love doing everything.
Mary, what's word processing meant to your work here in the firm?
It's meant that I can get proceedings out a lot quicker. Documents can be churned out with just minor amendments, 10 to the dozen. It means that where I've got, say, 5 or 6 sets of proceedings, that it can be done very, very quickly, whereas it might take Suzanne a day to type every single one. So it's much quicker from that point of view, and Suzanne can handle routine correspondence and personal matters and lengthy letters of advice and things like that.
So it's been of advantage to you as a solicitor?
Oh, yes, very much so. It's really streamlined my operations.
The firm operates several small word processing centres rather than one large area. Each centre contains 3 word processing machines and a printer. All the word processing machines are connected to a central computer which has all the legal documents required by the firm stored onto magnetic hard disks.
Interrogatory's got 1 hour or 2.
2, I think. I'll just check.
Judy, staring at the screen all day long and typing in commands, can that get a bit boring?
Yes, it can to a certain extent, depending on the type of job that you're doing. But like every job, there's some tedious bits and pieces that you have to do. Mainly the large and complicated documents. Well, first of all, they have to be typed onto the machine, and after that they come back for edit after edit, and sometimes quite substantial edits, so that they may take you most of the day, some jobs.
What would that have involved in the old days before word processing?
Oh, retyping the whole thing over and over again.
Would that have taken days instead of one day?
Yes.
Being a secretary for so long, but the sort of thing had lost its, touch. It was exciting, and I really just needed a change and to get away from the phones and the client. And then here you can just get on with your work and just do, solid big work, because you sometimes miss the clients who knew you and things like that, and doing personal things for your boss.
And you, Diane, have you made the right decision?
I am happy. Goals? I'm going to be another secretary at school too on his whole.
I see. I go on trade practice. Look, long and looking at the people work on the particular chapters, and then if you took advantage about this, we wanted it in a different way, and we're sorry to able to change sectors as feeding it to the head in their life. Boring.
And explain to him.
Sloto nomor 282 yang diadakan semalam sebagai berikut.